Radha Jasodananana Brajanjana Ranjana Jasodananana Brajajana Ranjana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjam Bihari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Jaivam Narottamam Devam Sarasvitam Vyasam Tado Jayariyadare Shanbata Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Hrityanta Stohit Abdrani Vedanoti Saritsatam Asta Praya Babeshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevayam Bhagavati Utamashloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. So we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, chapter 63, text 28 and 29. Tapto ham. Do we have anything? Okay. Te tejasa dushahina santo grinatki ubenina dwarina tavat tapto dehinam te angri mulam no sevaran java asanubasdana. Get the right meter on here. Taptoham te tejasa dush. Tapto tapto taptoham te tejasa dushanahaya. Taptoham te tejasa dushahena. Santo grenat yubenena dwarena. Santo grenat yubenena dwarena. Tavat tapto dehinam te grinam mulam. Tavat tapto dehinam te grim mulan. No sevaran yavat ashnu badaha. No sevaran yavat asanu badana. Taptoham te te sadusharina. Santo grinario benena dwarena. Tavat tapto dehinam te grihi mulan. No seraran yavadanu badaha. Taptoham te tajasa dushinaya. Santo grinario benena dwarena. Tavatapo dehinam te grimulam. No sevaran yabadanu beadena. Taptoham te tejas dushanena. Santo grinario benena dwarena. Tavatapto dehinam te grimulam. No seraran yabad asun anubanda. Anyone else? Taptaha, burned. Aham, I. Te, your. Tejasa, by the power. Dushahina, suffering, or sufferable, insufferable, excuse me. Chanta, cold. Ugrina, yet, burning. Ati, extremely. Ubanina, terrible. Dwarina, fever. Tabat, for so long. Tapaha, the burning torment. Dehinam, of embodied souls. Te, your. Angri, of the feet. Mulam, The soul. Na, do not. U, indeed. Severam, severe. Yavat, as long as. Asha, in the material desires. Anubandaha, continuously bound. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada. I am tortured by the fierce power of your terrible fever weapon, which is cold yet burning. All embodied souls must suffer as long as they remain bound to material ambitions and thus averse to serving your feet. Purport. In the previous verse, the Shiva Dwara stated that those who live by violence will suffer similar violence at the hands of the Lord. But here, he further states that those who do not surrender to the Supreme Lord are especially liable to punishment, although the Shiva Dwara himself had acted violently up till now, since he has surrendered to the Lord and rectified himself. He hopes to receive the Lord's mercy. In other words, he has now become the Lord's devotee. Text 29. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Tri Shiraste Pananso Namsmi Vetute Maj Jvarad Bayam Yo Nao Smaranti Sambadam Tashyatwam Na Bavad Bayam. Translation. The Supreme Lord said, O three-headed one, I am pleased with you. May your fear of my fever weapon be dispelled, and may whoever remembers our conversation here have no reason to fear. Om Gyanam Tanaman Hasya Gyana Jana Shalakya Chakshuru Minitain Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakada Mayam Dadatvi Svatatatikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Patakabalam Shri Rupam Sagratitam Sahagana Vaganabhavitam Tam Sajipam Sadhuitam Savadutam Parijana Sahita Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Pada Sahagana Lalita Shri Vatsahavitam Cha He Krishna Karun Sindhu Dina Jan Bandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopisha Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavanishwari Vrishparanu Sutta Devi Parinami Hari Priye Vanchakapa Karu Prishcha Kripa Sindhu Vivacha Patitinam Padna Vivo Vaishnavivo No Maha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So it's very interesting here that it is stated the types of fever one can attain. And there could be burning, and there also you can feel ice cold. And the treatment of that. So I was thinking, this is another one of Krishna's manifestations when we catch a fever. And it is said if your fever is 107, then you're finished. Bas, right? So one of the things that people experience is when they get a fever, they feel their temperature is very high, but they feel cold. It's one of those symptoms. And it's interesting here that the Shiva Dwara is also experiencing this. So Krishna is actually giving him some disease. this weapon of disease. And now we get it because we're all so violent. As we read in the previous text, there's this violence, and these things that we engage in. So here, when we are not in accord with the Supreme Lord, then we get these symptoms, this fever. One of the things I had noted in here was in this particular, this is a Agni Tapaha, right? It's an Agni Tapaha. And we see that one of the things that happened in this is in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 5.13.6, where in the translation it says that sometimes the conditioned soul jumps into shallow water or a shallow river, or being short of food grains, he goes to beg from people who are not at all charitable. Sometimes he suffers from the burning heat of household life, another fever, right? Which is like a forest fire. Sam Savadava Naranita Loka. We're burning in this forest fire. And sometimes he becomes sad to have his wealth, which is dear is life, plundered by kings and what's the other state? And then there's this heavy income tax that takes place. So how can one be sad to have wealth? Well, you're always in fear that it might be terminated, right? So we have this fear factor. How do we resolve the concept of fear? Om Namo Bhagavate Narasimhaya Namaste Tejas Avirabhibhava Vrajanaka Vrajadamsta Kamashayan Radiyatam Mutilatam Krasav Om Baha. So we're having this praying to the Lord because of his weapons, that he can actually deny us this fear. He can relieve us of the fear that we have. So we're experiencing these fears because we're not in accord with the Supreme Lord. So that one thing stood out to me. And then by the power, Tejasa, right? The power of the Lord, by his will. He can either give or he can remove. But we understand that the only way that these become effective, like we look at Prahlad Maharaj, Prahlad didn't have any fear. Why didn't Prahlad Maharaj have any fear? Why wasn't he afflicted by all the calamities that Hiranyakasipu put on him? Because he wasn't on a material plane. He was completely transcendental. So all those things that were material were illusionary. They didn't exist. So when the consciousness is in the right place, in the right time, in the right circumstance, then the effects of heat and cold, right? Matras prasastu konteya, sitas no sukudukada, agama apayino netyas, tamsta tiksaswa, bharata. So we become balanced. We become sober. So we don't see this vacillation because we are completely dictated by the material energy. So when one surrenders to the Supreme Lord, then he's no longer subject to the predicaments of the material energy. And so we see this as an example. The word here is dushahena, insufferable. In other words, I cannot tolerate this. So out of common sense, one says, please grant me your mercy. Please grant me your mercy. I cannot tolerate this anymore. I was just thinking from last Monday to this Monday, and I was afflicted myself. Throat, sinuses, and my eye swelling. And I was trying to push on, and then diet and this. So I'm giving all these particular austerities. How deeper can I go? Can I take the lesson? Can I pay attention to what's going on in my specific universe? And doing so, I was able to, okay, let me not be disturbed what's happening. Let the body recover, but let my consciousness be intact. So Prahlad Maharaj is in the same space, right? But the only difference between Prahlad Maharaj and us is Prahlad Maharaj is eternally spiritual inside, and he's also eternally spiritual outside. I didn't have the fortune of being eternally spiritual outside, but that's the goal. The goal is to move the consciousness that we are not disturbed by the things that aren't real. And the more that we chip away at this is not real, this is not real, this is illusion, this is that, they're all this theater props, right? We have to clearly understand that we're in this play. And we see all these things are theater props. Then we go, oh, now I can use these props in the service of the eternal, right? I can put it in the service of reality or absolute. So we can put it in that fashion. But until such time, we have to continue with the practice, right? And then we call those things regulated principles, regulative principles, regulate, what it means to be regulated, right? I do certain things at a certain time in a certain place, right? I'm fixed. We kind of talked about these things yesterday in yesterday's Sunday feast about how being fixed. So fixation. Someone is on a train, and he has this stop comes on, let's say, at 95th Street. Now, let's not say 95th. Let's say 75th Street, right? But because he's looking out of the window and he's just observing everything, he misses a stop. So he makes it all the way to the end of 95th Street. And then he realized, I missed my stop. Well, because he was fixed. He was materially fixed. But you can see you're not affected, or you lose connection with things materially when your mind's fixed on something. That's just a material example. Just imagine you have a spiritual example of being fixed in something. So we have this shanta, cold, right? And yet there's the ugrena, burning sensation. So you have this hot and cold, right? Isn't this duality? Yeah. You have this sukham and dukkam, happiness and then giving distress. You have this heat and cold, right? All these things are existing, but they're not real. They only take effect in unreality or non-realistic environment or virtual reality. And so that way, we can actually enjoy the material senses because they're rooted in those things. But as soon as we disconnect from the material senses, then we cease to enjoy. We find that the taste is so bitter that there's no real taste in material effects. So we're always looking for some higher taste. But because we're only associating with matter, we only think it's material. I see this beautiful form, let me enjoy. And then we have association with the form, and then shortly thereafter, we lose our taste. I always say that person starts speaking and they ruin the environment for me. They ruin my illusion. Their speaking or their ignorance is like a pin, and they pop my bubble, right? So we do this with association. I like this, or we taste something. We go somewhere, oh, this wasn't what I thought it was, right? So it gets pinpricked, right? So this is the material energy. So once we cultivate, it's not like I don't have desire. We just don't have a material desire. And we can't artificially be there. That's the other important thing. We can theoretically talk, I should do this and that, or I'm not this and I'm not that. But everyone sees your activity and they can see, no, they're still stuck here. How do you help a person move from where they think they are to where they should be? Well, one thing you can do is help the person by maybe reflecting where you are. One would be, well, I'm not there yet. I'm not where you aspire to be, but I can see things that I have hang-ups or impediments with, and I want to move forward. So these are some of the things. That's the power of the Sangha, because you see devotees at different platforms in their consciousness. So you have a window into, this is how I can take advantage of this. It's not that you're lower or higher. It's just that you haven't achieved the vision yet. And then when you internalize it, you have jnana, vijnana, tiptratma. So we can actually start progressing toward how you can be the master of yourself. Not anybody else, but being your own master. And then embodied soul, dehinam. Dehi no ashman yata dehe, kawanan yavananjara, tatta dihantara praptiya didas tatra nimuyati. So we see the embodied soul, right? And you can see how the soul, the embodied soul, is moving from one body to the next. So the same thing in fever. You're moving from hot to cold. You're going through the cold body, the hot body. We forget about the lukewarm, or we forget about the stases. Right now I'm feeling okay, but tomorrow I have a fever, and then I'm feeling cold, like I was experiencing. You know, we had so much humidity here, and all of a sudden it got cold. So I needed an extra blanket, right, to stay warm. So now my feet are cold, my hands are cold, throat, everything, my body. So my body, when the temperature was much humid and hot, now it's just humid and cold. It's a different kind of cold. So you have to adjust. Just like if you're in the West Coast and the Rockies, there is dry heat, and then there's dry cold. And then you find yourself needing more moisturizer and things like this. So you see your body is going through certain phases. So here, we're trying to negate these material desires, right? Asha, the material desires. We're trying to negate these and trying to move into something that's more fixed, permanent, or constitutional. See, our condition is what we experience in matter. Our constitution is what we have a birthright spiritually. So this is our challenge. How do we move out of conditions and to constitution? Constitution is a fixed thing. Conditions, well, the conditions, as I mentioned, the weather it's so, it's nice, but it won't stay that way, right? My hair is long, it won't stay that way. I had long hair and now I have balding. I was looking at a picture my sister sent me yesterday. It was sitting next to my brother. And I was remarking, oh, what a nice looking fellow. I had hair, had a hairline, right? And I was looking at my brother and laughing. He doesn't have any hair. And now I look now. Well, look now, I have no hair. So it's these kind of things that, those are just simply conditions. So we're always in some type of material condition. And the idea is how to get out of the condition and move in the constitution. So we have to just put the toys of condition aside, right? Even when we want to pick them up. Or there's the exercise that, okay, this week I will not play with my toys. I'll wait till next week. So now you're starting to regulate. Here's regulation. You're learning how to regulate the things that you've been materially engaged in, and then you're also learning how to unlock the spiritual condition. Now you're bringing it into the regulation so that it becomes a fixed constitutional circumstance. So that pretty much covers the first sloka. So, but I wanted to talk about some other things about tapaha, right? Severely attacked by fever or similarly painful conditions. And then there's when one is aggrieved. And then there's the burning, which we have in this particular shloka. So there's certain different references that are talked about. And if you go to Srimad Bhagavatam 6:14-59, you see that Sri Sukadeva Goswami continue, accompanied by his wife, who was thus lamenting for her dead son. King Chitraketu began crying loudly with an open mouth, being greatly aggrieved. So this is another type of burning, right? So he goes through all this trouble, Chitraketu, to have a son. He couldn't have a son, right? There was some um, austerity that he went through, but he only got the mercy of Narada Muni and another sage. So he gets this object that his wife consumes, one wife. He's got, I believe, 9,999 wives, right? So she consumes, she has a son, they become envious, they also have a burning, right? They have a fever. Their fever is envy. There's 6 enemies of the mind. So this big envy, they become delusional, mad. So let's just kill the boy. They're not thinking this is our son too. They're just thinking he didn't come from my womb. So you heard that term, my enemy's enemy is my friend. So all the other wives, they come together, bind together, and they were thinking, well, because we don't have, why should we suffer? She shouldn't be any different from us. Crabs in a bucket. So they kill the boy. And Chitraketu, he's wailing. So he's burning. This is what happens when you lose something near and dear to you, which is temporary. So again, you have this Agni Tapaha, this fever that's burning. So what did he do? He had to go through some purification. So we're seeing a lot of this happen. This aggrievement, the loss, and all of us have experienced some type of loss. The question is, have we learned from it? Or can we reach back in that lesson plan and bring the application again? Because we go right back into some type of attachment. We go right back to it. I find myself there, and I find that I always have to remember I had this, I had that, and when I was relieved of it, I actually felt some liberation, some mukta, right? I felt free. So we have to consider the lessons of the past are actually the prospects for our future. So we have to think about those things that we've experienced. And the text 29, we have the Supreme Lord speaking. He speaks to the, as he calls them, Tri Siraha, the three-headed one. And again, I can't get this 369 out of my head, right? We still have that 369. So he's speaking to him because now the Lord's actually pleased. Because he's actually prostrating himself. He's recognizing the authority. Krishna is happy. First, there's the process of surrender, and then he's offering sweet words to the Supreme Lord, right? He's telling him, was it text 26, how you are the object of devotion and things like that. And Krishna's pleased with that. So this is how, actually, Shiva's the same way too. Shiva is easily angered and easily pleased. But Krishna is always pleased, whether the situation appears to be angry or pleasant. But Krishna, no one can begin to understand the psyche of Krishna. But it may be possible that he's seeing Shiva Jara non-differently than he's seeing Shiva at this point. This is my devotee. He accepts you. This is my devotee now. And this is why he's offering these sweet words to him, right? And then he goes on. Others that we see in this pastime are not so astute. So they get a different kind of mercy. You know, they get removed from the play, right? Your lines are over, right? The play moves on, so you can go sit backstage. So they're getting a different kind of. Um, but it's nice to note that here the Lord accepts Shivadrata as his devotee. He accepts him. And in reality, everyone is Krishna's devotee. Who isn't Krishna's devotee? It's this we have to recognize that. So if we look at devotee other than wearing garbs, it's my devoted one. This person is also my lover. Devotion is love. Let's think of that a little differently. Other than he's the devotee, he's shaved up, he's sorry, whatever. We see this thing. We have this image of what a devotee is. But devotee means one who is a lover of the Supreme Lord. And the Lord loves him. And this is the reason why Lord Chaitanya takes on this role. Because he also wants to be the recipient of love of Krishna, even though he's Krishna. But he wants the experience. So when we decide to be the love of Krishna, then we get a certain kind of mercy. We get we inherit all the things that a son and daughter may get through inheritance, right? We get Sat Chit Ananda Vigraha, right? We get all those things. We have everything that Krishna has. And we can have the same quantity as Krishna on the condition that Krishna is the expanding energy. In other words, Krishna is the quantity. So everything is available. We don't have to manufacture a thing. We have our own quality or quantity. We have our quality, but we don't have the same quantity. But the quantity is available only because we accept Krishna. So everything's available. So if you go to the source, then you have the source. And simply, we just need to consider having the source rather than being the source. And that's the distinction. Have the source and try not to be the source. So Krishna is so kind. He accepts someone who forgot him, forgot his relationship, and also took on another master, right? He took on, what was that? Tattva Darshina. So this is authorized because we know Shiva is in that, he's one of the 12 Mahajans. So we know that. But just in the same case, the Yamadutas, when they came in front of the Vishnudutas, they could not understand the concepts that, well, who's supreme here? And Yamaraj had to tell them, well, this knowledge is coming from the supreme. I'm not the supreme. So they have to understand the source of all knowledge. Who's the source of all knowledge? So we have to come to that conclusion. So I apologize for today's dissertation. I was given mercy not too long ago to do the class. So um, I'm appreciative of the opportunity. So I'll open it up for questions, comments. I'm pretty sure there may be many that we can unpack a lot of the things that we have covered today. So maybe we'll start with senior devotee.
Hare Krishna.
Jai.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Nice class, though it is short notice.
Thanks for being nice to me. He said nice class.
There something you mentioned which is very, very valuable to have a relationship with Krishna. So sometimes we see that the relationship with Krishna is always there with every living entity. Like, do we call the devotees or non-devotees who are there? It's Sarvasya Chaham Pratichanvishta. Krishna is always there. So, point is that, um, like, relationship with the Lord is established eternally, and relationship with the devotees sometimes like may not be as strong as. So how to rebuild the relationship with us devotees, to be, Krishna says, um, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, like, if you are saying a devotee of mine, you are not my devotee. If you are saying devotee of a devotee of mine, then you are my devotee. So I'm trying to understand that relationship within the devotees should be bound and strong. Can you
Yeah.
share?
So it's interesting because we're seeing this weapon, and the weapon's a devotee of Lord Shiva. And then Krishna, because he had some recognition of Krishna, then Krishna accepts him as his devotee. So the process is still there. There has to be a, I always use this example. You can see the president on television or the prime minister, but you may not be able to see him in person. In order to see the person in person, you must know someone in the administration in order to see him. And as soon as there's a connection or reconnection, then the president may treat you as his dear friend. So Krishna's not cheap. And this is why Krishna is saying, if one says he's my devotee, he's not my devotee. But one is my devotee's devotee, then he's my devotee. Krishna's not cheap. You can't be artificial. You have to be authentic. So there has to be, here's another example. You can rise in the morning and come to Mangalarati and then not bathe. Then later you bathe, right? So no one may know this, but Krishna knows this. And maybe Guru knows this. Or maybe some realized soul knows this. But the reality is, when you skip those steps, then you actually are shutting the door, because Krishna wants devotion. And I don't mean like a whip of obedience. Whack, 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 whack. You do it as like, no. When you're actually in love with Krishna, then like the gopis, they're not supposed to leave their homes after midnight. That's love, is that you will violate protocol. But your consciousness, you can't just be anybody. Well, I saw the gopis do it, I will follow it. But there's no devotion there. There's no love. But when love's there, you'll do anything for the object of that love. And so if Krishna is asking to test your love, that you go through a medium of a spiritual master, because he wants to say, will you love him? Will you love, what Prabhupada say? If you love me, you love my dog. So if you're willing to go through, and spiritual master is not a dog, right? It's like G-O-D, backwards. But if you're willing to do that, you're willing to sacrifice anything for the object of the love. So that's why that process is there. And who knows how many lifetimes we've been in that process. So I think, for me, a good way of understanding that is understanding that if I say I love someone, and that the relationship is reasonable, sometimes love isn't reasonable. I said, why would he do that? Oh, he's mad in love. But in that process, if you're trying to get that, it's like you could take an engineering class, but if you don't take the exam, you can't move to the next step. So it's like this. If you want to progress in relationship, even in Grihastha life or Brahmachari life, when you have relationships with people, what are you willing to do in order to extract the love? But that's presupposing that that person has that love that's available to abstract or to extract. So there's a process only there so that we don't cheapen the relationship. so it becomes authentic. The process may not be so important, but Krishna is interested in authenticity, that we don't try to cheapen relationships by just placing labels on ourselves. I'm a devotee. I'm this. I'm Brahmin. Because Lord Chaitanya didn't care about any of those things. He was already exhibiting the concept of extreme love for Krishna. And he was willing to do, well, if I have to take sannyas, I'll take it. So people can properly respect. Otherwise, the relationship would have been cheapened. They honor the tradition more than they did the person. He's sannyasi. Oh, sannyasi's a big thing, right? So they're into the whole systems and the steps in the systems. So Lord Chaitanya says, well, I'll do this so that I can extract that love for them. So that was Lord Chaitanya's mission. He didn't have to do that. You notice he didn't just come down in 4 arms, or for that matter, he didn't maintain his 6-arm form, right? He didn't do all these things. So what he's doing, he's taking an opportunity, right, to follow a process because people are in a process. So he appears in the process in order to help them cultivate the love for God. Got it. Does that explain? Anyone else? I didn't know if you were wincing because you had to listen to my class or you were sitting down.
No. Thank you for the class. It was a wonderful class. Um, if I can share just a little bit, when it comes to relationships, I always think of, between devotees, I always think of Krishna's mother and father, and we're a bunch of kids in the living room, right? We're out in the yard, and we just, the more we treat our brothers and sisters kindly, the more the parents are going to be endeared with us. Like, look at him, how he's doing his little brothers and sisters, and they're going to feel that. So I just thought I'd share that. That's a personal thought, how I think of devotees. It's just we're all God's children, and Krishna's the Godhead, or God's, Radha Krishna, so it's family. Um, One thing I wanted to ask is, what do you think could help people to understand this knowledge that we have? We think of it almost like second nature or common sense sometimes. Sometimes we're like, well, duh, right? But when we're trying to share it with others, it seems like to them it's far-fetched or just like fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
So I was wondering if you have any thoughts about how to share this knowledge with others in a way that they can really kind of get it.
Well, I'll tell you what I know. Um, I got this axiom when I used to do um, sales work in insurance. And one of the things I learned, people don't buy your product, they buy you because of relationship. Your product can be the best insurance policy. They're all pretty much the same because the insurance board, Illinois, Indiana, they all have these things. So the products have to be the same. So you're presenting that we're more loyal, we take care of our customers, blah, blah, blah. Okay, those are advertising slogans. But then when they actually meet the insurance agent, you start talking to the person. You're not really thinking about the insurance anymore. You're thinking about the person. What's the quality of the person? I actually like him. I like being around him. He's nice. I can talk with him. He understands me, right? So if you can't do those things with the public, giving information is useless. Now, some people may approach because they may be attracted to, maybe they have intelligence to, well, I like the philosophy. We have a lot of people who do that. They like the philosophy, And the next thing, the other things we mistakenly judged them on, well, they didn't join. And then we start taking it personal. So the reality of people are attracted to you. They are attracted to what you say because it's coming from your heart. If it's rehearsed or if it's script and it's not coming from a realization, then they're going to notice that. I had a person last night. I said something in class and they bolted to me and they were asking some things, some personal things about their family. And it's a common thing that people do. Well, how do I preach to my family member? Well, how do I preach to the people on the south side? You know, it's body politics. And what I said was the same thing. My daughter's probably going to hear this. I told her, I said, don't preach to the body, preach to the soul. This is an opportunity for us to have a soul connection. If you always see someone, oh, Russian body or English body or African body, you know, it's like boxes. You go into a shoe store, they got all kinds of boxes, different colors, right? And sometimes the boxes are empty and sometimes the boxes have shoes in them, right? So you see a customer, oh, because his body's this, we'll give him this box. Because his body's that, we'll give him this box. No, we fit the shoes according to what their propensities are. Oh, I like Nikes, this do it. I like this, it's product. They get associated with, this is what they do in advertising. So if material advertisers do it, why can't we do it? Right? People buy Nikes because of a famous basketball player, because they adore the person. It's superficial a devotion, but they adore the person. They think, well, I can be like this person. Well, the same way with Krishna. They want to maybe hear the philosophy because there's something so sublime in you that they want to associate it with it. And if you just do that, and don't get the impression that you can just talk to anybody and it'll work. Only Krishna has that. Krishna will send people to you for you to preach to. But the consciousness is we can affect everyone just by the holy name. They all won't have to come. Everything is time stamped. Everything is time stamped. So if we're doing preaching and you preach to a person, we call it a turnover in sales. It's like if you've done telemarketing. Someone will do the product and they'll turn you over to somebody else and they do more of the details and they close the sale. So we're a team. We're a team. We're a family. So in the family, you may say one thing and Prabhuji may say one thing and then another devotee, and that closes the deal. It all led up to maybe one person that they can have a heart connection with. So we shouldn't be upset, but we should be aware that we're part of the process. There's no failure in this process. Just by you speaking to them, later on they may pick it up, right? So don't be in despair that you go out and immediately they pick it up. Sometimes a person picks it up and we're amazed, but that's Krishna's working through you. So whenever you're feeling empowered to be surrendered, to give the message of Krishna, like in kind, that person may correlate with you. And Krishna, in order to boost you in your Krishna consciousness, he'll give you someone you can preach to and you feel charged and you want to do it again another day. And then another day you can't sell one book. It happens like that. He wants to keep you, anyone who says he's my devotee is not my devotee, but one who says he's my devotee. And that's the plateau we want to stay in. Okay, it's 8:30. Oh, go ahead. Hare Krishna. Go ahead, please. She had a question.
I just kind of wanted to share like a realization, like listening to these classes. Is too loud?
No,
Too close?
you're good.
About, like before I came to Krishna consciousness, I was like, I'm from the family from like very strange relationships, and like it kind of like set my mind on being like very anxious all the time. And it was like I was at the point where it's very hard to even to maintain my life. It was like being like like those kind of like heat, like in your head, like thoughts going like kind of. And I used like cold, like like I learned about Wim Hof method, and I used cold therapy to get out of that mindset. And now I feel that when coming here, I don't need that external cold to keep me centered. Like chanting and being in with the devotees, this act is kind of has the same effect as the kind of cooling, centering effect to my mind and my soul. So it's kind of, I don't know, it's just an observation. It's that how is healing
Mm.
basically.
It's nice to see yourself in Krishna consciousness where you are.
You were describing, you put it very nicely, the person's looking for the material form, and it may actually be that, it's like actually experiencing your balloon being pricked when you actually experience that material form. So in this particular case, the Shiva Dvara has been advised by Krishna to not create fear in others. So I was reflecting a little on that, and I was thinking, making the connection with earlier on that persons who are living violently actually by not being surrendered to Krishna. So all that existing on that plane of just sensorial enjoyment is actually living in a kind of violent way. So in making those connections, I wanted to connect with Naveen Krishna's question. It means that because all of us have had this history of living in that kind of violent way, and maybe even having difficulty at times to slide into that space because of forgetting that surrender to Krishna, then there's the danger always of some violence being either being violent oneself or experiencing someone else being violent because of, even if the person has surrendered to Krishna, of sliding into that space. So I guess the question would be how does one just leave it up to Krishna to settle the matter as he did with Shiva Dvara if one is observing violence or experiencing violence coming when there should be surrender to Krishna, or one understands that someone has taken that step to surrender to Krishna, but the violence is being exhibited?
Yeah. One thought came to mind that as soon as we get into this process of Krishna consciousness, we actually unplug the fan, but the fan is still running. So we may still experience those things. It's like a souffle. If you open the oven before it's done, it collapses. And we're like souffles. And sometimes we're not finished, and then it just collapses on us. But if you look at the weapons we use for violence, which creates fear, is sometimes we criticize, even criticize other devotees. We just say some snarky, critical remark. That is the easiest way for the mercy of Krishna to be withdrawn from you. And you don't even know it. So the thing is, if you're sensitive or your heart hurts when you hear these things or you do these things, I've done them, to family members. And I felt a certain way. And I immediately asked for their forgiveness. And then I also try to make a mental correction. So these things are recoverable because we're in the process of regulating. It's a process. So being aware that you're doing those things are extremely important. It means that you are in a certain level of advancement than those who actually just do these things. It becomes old habit. But any level of criticism, and you're not a guru, see, guru, you're authorized to do some things. I don't mean everything. There's some things. If it's instructional. So we have to see where we are. It's more important rather than looking externally, looking internally. And so this is where the ahimsa concept comes in. How to be nonviolent. And you have to catch yourself. I have to do it all the time. Sometimes I'm thinking. I may even be just watching, mentally thinking, I'm criticizing. Then I have to stop the process. It's an old habit. It didn't happen in just this lifetime. It's just to be aware that it's there. Ask the question. Look for modalities. What can I do to avert my mind, not distraction, avert my mind back to Krishna? Because if you're in pleasure all the time of Krishna consciousness, it's almost impossible to be violent. So this example that we're seeing, here's a devotee of Shiva that now is in the presence of the all-attractive. And then he surrendered. Then it was very easy to make a transition. Who knows what was happening in prior circumstances? So the idea is to be present with yourself, understanding these events do happen because I'm in the mental energy. But I do have a process. Let me go for the nectar. Let me go for the sweetness. Let me look for those things. Can you find something beneficial in that you criticize? It could be simply, I was just like that. Maybe this person will get the opportunity like me and become the Krishna consciousness. So it's the things I'm looking at, seeing yourself as the person you're criticizing, seeing yourself in that situation, and how would it feel if some just stranger or someone you thought was dear to you is this blasting you? So there's some mental things that can be done. But we have to remember, as I said earlier, don't preach to the body, preach to the soul. And for this matter, don't preach to the mind, right? In the sense that the mind has its own identity. You are the guru, and you can speak in a certain way. I know you've suffered in the past, but this is the solution to those things that you suffered from. Are you willing to accept it? Because if you don't, and this is speaking, I'm thinking of my guru, he would do this. He has these little techniques for speaking. So if you don't do that, I'm going to leave you behind. And I can tell you one thing, the material mind does not want to be left behind. It does not want to be neglected. But it can be a certain kind of violence on your own mind. But the idea is that Bhaktivinoda Thakur, I think he mentioned that the mind's like a little child. And you have to treat it as such. Because it may do the most ridiculous things. Thinking, I'm an adult, I can say this. I've been in the movement for 40 plus years or 50 years. I can do this. I'm senior. Those kind of things. That's the ahankara, the false ego coming into play. So, and then the other thing are groups. Rather than waiting in class, if we have like groups, like counseling groups, then we can bring these istakoshi, those things. If you feel comfortable, then you can reveal your mind. And then there could be some progress, toward the goal of not being so critical. And giving people permission that you respect. Correct me if you see me make the wrong turn. And when you're in good association, if you say, and I may do that, someone may say, hey, okay, you need to, that's not appropriate. And they stop. Oh, okay, I was there. Rather than get mad at the person, I gave you permission to do that. So these little things you can do for your psychology. I hope that helped. Is that all right? Hare Krishna. Manantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki. Srila Prabhupada ki. Nitai Gauda Pramanande.